We are on the clock. Welcome to the show. IB Nation Sports Talk up and running. Glad to have you with us here today. Final IB Nation Sports Talk of the week. And Jesse Stiers makes his first appearance of the week. Well, how are you today, sir? You're looking good.
Thanks. I'm doing well. I actually just got done showering, shaved up. Thought I'd look my best for the show today. I always forget that Thursday is like the last show that you do before the game itself. I know there's other shows, but it's the last IB show or Nation IB Nation Sports Talk show. So I feel some sort of pressure to give some good information today on Stanford and all kinds of other things. But other than that, I'm
Jesse,
doing okay.
Jesse, I think you've got some eligibility left that you could use, don't you?
I think I have like 1.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, might want to pump and get out there, do a little hit, do a little speed training, whatever it happens to be. We've got a lot we're going to get to today. We've got a Stanford beat writer who will be coming up at the tail end of the show, but we've got a lot of news that we're going to get to. The reference to Bo Bauer, of course. We are not Marshall. Welcomes Jesse back to the show. He's been a little under the weather this week. He had planned to kind of be off anyway because of like some vacation that never came because of the Hurricane Ian and all that stuff. They were going to go to Florida and then they ended up here. And yeah, so Tyler wants to know, how was your vacation? I guess you got to go, Louisville, Cincinnati was the extent of your vacation last weekend, right?
Yeah, so Louisville was fun. Made the most of it. Got on a couple bourbon tours, which was fun. Went up to Cincinnati on the way back. That was solely because my girlfriend went to the University of Cincinnati, so it was homecoming. So we went and saw a bunch of her friends, hung out for homecoming weekend. That was a lot of fun. It was all fun until we got home. Late Sunday evening, I started to feel sick, and then felt sick the last like 3 days. So I haven't worked much the last few days. Felt under the weather, so that's the only downside of vacation, or you could say it's been an extended vacation. So, there's two ways to look at it.
True, true. I guess that's true. Well, while we're sitting here, go ahead and smash that like button if you would. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff for us. We appreciate you doing that. Helps out Irish Breakdown greatly. Of course, it's Notre Dame Stanford, a Saturday night game under the lights, Notre Dame Stadium. We've got IB countdown to kickoff. Vince and I will Saturday morning. It's a big recruiting weekend as well. Ryan Roberts is going to join us on the show on Saturday. We'll talk a little recruiting, who's here, and some big things going on this weekend. Let's just jump right into it, though, today. Marcus Freeman said during his Zoom conference earlier today, Bo Bauer out for the season with a knee injury. He was Notre Dame's fourth linebacker. He'd been playing with the injury for a little bit and, could only take it so long. So he is done for the year. This is his fifth year, and he's already played in 5 games. So that is pretty much it for Bo Bauer. Big special teams contributor as well. Freeman said that Prince Kollie will likely see more snaps. You could see Junior Tuihalamaka maybe get some as well. I think folks are pretty excited to see Prince Kollie, but you obviously don't want to see a captain and a guy who's put in, what he's put into the program like Bo Bauer go down like this.
Yeah, so there's a couple things to kind of get into. First of all, would be Bo Bauer being out for the rest of the season with a knee injury. Obviously that's a tough blow when you consider what he does as a nickel linebacker on the special teams that you mentioned, the fact that he was a captain and a leader, and then obviously you never want to have a guy kind of end his career on an injury like this. You talked about it's already his 5th year. He's already played 5 games, so he's really not going to get another year. And yeah, he's been one of their best sure tackling linebackers, in my opinion, especially, you see that on special teams, his speed and agility. He actually made a really nice third and goal play against BYU this past week, where he shot the gap and saved a touchdown on a really nice run fit. And then moving on to Prince Kollie, seeing more snaps. I think that's something that a lot of us have been wanting to see, but you never want to see it as a result of someone else getting hurt. But it opens the opportunity for Kollie, and Collie's been playing well. He had a really nice sack on a QB spy against BYU. And I see the nickel kind of QB spy role being something that Kollie can be very good at and handle, and get his feet wet and kind of get into the rhythm of this defense a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they need someone who can move more sideline to sideline at this point. All these linebackers have had their different issues. Jack Kaiser has been better since he's moved inside. more. We haven't seen as much of JD Bertrand, but again, laterally, JD Bertrand can get exposed, and Maris Leofold just there's just some confounding things with him. But this linebacker unit as a group needs to pull its way up, and maybe getting a shot of Prince Kali can kind of help that. I don't know, because just like you outlined right there, we've seen some good things from him so far, and he's a good young talent that people have been kind of waiting for. And again, you always hate to see injuries pave the way, but when there are injuries, what's the mantra? Next man in, and the next man in has to do his job now. So we'll see what Prince and probably some other guys can do in some different spots as well.
I think Prince Kali getting the opportunity this week is something that would be very beneficial for him, because if the Notre Dame offense can kind of handle things the way they're supposed to, we might be able to see some, more backup guys get the opportunity and get some more playing time. And I think someone like Prince Kali, who is on the border of, the kind of ones and twos or getting in on certain packages, could really benefit of just getting a lot of time, game time experience this coming week against Stanford.
Don't expect to see Jalen Sneed, though. The freshman, as talented as he is. Marcus Freeman was asked specifically about him today. Said, probably not in the near future. Things are looking better. He's trending in the right direction at practice, but they need to see more out of him to feel confident that he can go out there on Saturdays and do his job. So, I mean, the future of the position is really bright, but the future doesn't matter right now. You got to figure out right now and how you're going to maneuver the rest of the season. So at least what we've seen from Kali is a good sign. Some other guys, Howard Cross, who missed the game last week, expect him to be back this week, according to Marcus Freeman. Tariq Bracy is the next big one, though, still iffy after the hamstring injury last week. The nickelback, of course, best defensive back this season. Freeman said he looked good at practice yesterday, expects him to be able to give him something. But expect to see probably some Ryan Barnes as well, and maybe Ramon Henderson in those nickel packages. But this is, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, Jesse, this is a big receiving unit that Stanford has, and I think their best chance to move the ball is through the air. So Tariq Bracy could be pretty important Saturday night if he's able to go.
Yeah, both of those guys that you mentioned, Howard Cross and Tariq Bracy, are important for different reasons. Howard Cross has been a really, really solid player so far this season, plugging up that middle. They'll need him to stuff up some of Stanford's RPO looks and what they're trying to accomplish, getting the run kind of started early, which then leads to setting up their passing game. And then Bracy has obviously been Notre Dame's most consistent playmaker on defense all season, in my opinion. That was shown immediately last week with the interception to start the game. You never want to see a guy sit out, but you never want to push a guy. And considering Notre Dame's upcoming schedule, if Bracy's not ready, there's no reason to kind of, really push him, because I think that there's bigger fish to fry when, looking at Clemson and Syracuse kind of in the immediate future. You don't want him to further tweak things in a game that's, it's important. Obviously, every game is important. You're going to win every game, but I think that they have shown that they have depth in the secondary to maybe give Bracy some extra time off to recover.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so those are kind of the injury updates. The big question of the day, we're going to talk a little specifics about Stanford coming up here in minutes, but my question today, after what we've seen from Michael Mayer, this is year 3, and there has been no plateau in Michael Mayer's play. He just keeps continuing to elevate. We saw the exclamation mark last week with the 11 catches, setting the new Notre Dame tight end receptions, the all-time record, moving past Tyler Eifert, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Can Michael Mayer be stopped?
I think Mayer can be stopped, but I don't want to, for Notre Dame's purposes, I don't want him to see him be stopped, because
he can be, but you don't want him to be.
Yeah, he's the ultimate X factor kind of on their offense, because we know, what they're going to do with their 3-headed running back monster. But we've talked about this kind of a little bit in the past, and I think it got brought up a little bit during the broadcast this past Saturday. Is Notre Dame is willing or okay to kind of be mediocre at the wide receiver position, because they have one of the best receiving tight ends in the country, and he makes up for that, aspect of the game. And so when you have Michael Mayer excelling and exceeding, he's only going to make that kind of load harder for your already mediocre wide receiver cast. And so going forward, there's things that teams, can do to slow him down. And I think that, the more effort that they put towards Mayer, the more it's only going to open up kind of some of these other things in terms for Notre Dame wide receivers. You saw Jalen Thomas have a good game this past week. I think that that's more of what you can, you can see. And I think that's what this offense needs, is that one kind of big playmaker wide receiver to step up to help out the run game and to help out Mayer. Because if you can get all three of those things in synchronization, I think that this offense can be one of the harder offenses to stop in the country when you're talking about, three different kind of methods of attack. You have your intermediate passing with Mayer, you have your deep down the field passing with your wide receivers, and then obviously, pounding the run game with your three different wide receivers or your three different running backs. And then the variations off of that with your running backs being able to catch passes out of the backfield as well.
As Alan pointed out, the 11 catches is a single game record for Mayer as well. So, he holds both the single game and the career receptions record for a tight end. So what specifically did you see in the BYU game? I know you went back, you kind of looked at some things in detail. What'd you see in the BYU game that made him so successful? And how do you think teams could try to adjust? Like he's picking up a head of steam now. There were a couple games where we didn't necessarily see as much of him. So what do you think? What do you going forward? How do you see them trying to stop Michael Mayer?
Well, going forward, I think what I'll start with is kind of what I saw that made him super successful, and it's really nothing like uncommon, considering kind of his size and his catch making ability that he's shown. And I think the number one thing that has really helped him, and it sounds really easy and kind of basic, but he's taking advantage of one-on-one matchups, whether that be a linebacker, a safety, a cornerback. It doesn't really matter depending on who it is. He's using different aspects. Say it's a linebacker, he's using more of his speed. Say if it's safety, a corner, he's just kind of using his big body and his basketball background to kind of shield these guys or box them out in some situations. And so that goes along with Mayer being able to use his body to get favorable position. Obviously he's got good speed, but it's not like he's going to burn past safeties and corners. He's just using his bodies and making safeties and corners kind of have to play through him or around him to get to the ball. And when he has, those strong, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a lot, I'm sure you saw it, but there's a lot of his catches, specifically on the third downs, where he's using a lot of his hands. He's using his hands to go back and get the ball. He's not letting the ball kind of come to him. And I think a major thing that has to be brought up is Pine's ball placement. These passes that Pine are giving him are windows in which he can only catch it. It's, on both of those touchdown passes this past game, just great, ball placement, and then Mayer using his hands and obviously big size to get the ball. So like I said, it sounds relatively easy when you break it down, but that's what Notre Dame has done and what they're accomplishing. I watched on some of these drives, they threw out 4 different formations in a span of like 5 plays. They've gone, 12 personnel, 11 personnel, 21 personnel, 13 personnel, all in a span of 5 to 6 plays. And that's really hard for defenses to kind of keep track of, where certain guys are on the field. And I think that's what helps Mayer is, these matchups that he gets because of these different formations.
So you think, because you can see a case where it's like, man, you've got all these personnel groupings, what good is it doing? It's like you just keep throwing personnel groupings. So you think that could actually be helping them, changing them that much, going from 21 to 12 and to 30, just because of what you were just talking about there, losing track of who happens to be on the field at any given time.
Yeah, and it's not like you want to line up in 13 personnel 3 straight plays, but after going 11 and 12, and maybe you pop into a 13 personnel after
Right.
coming from a 21, it's just it makes it harder because then at that time you're loading up these kind of boxes to look like heavy run formations, and then you play action and you have Mayer in 13 personnel one-on-one with probably whoever you want, and like I said, he's already proven he's going to beat linebackers, corners, safeties. It doesn't really matter who the one is. It's just the fact of getting him one-on-one with someone else.
I'm curious what you think of this, like when you've watched him, because you and I, obviously, as Cowboys fans, we saw one of the, more traditional Y tight end type guy, and Mayer, I think, has the body of Jason Witten. Probably not as thick as Jason Witten towards the end of his career, obviously, when he was, the shaved head guy and getting a little bit older, but he's, as Vince and I were talking yesterday, he's less quick twitch than like Kelsey and Gronkowski and those kind of guys, and he's more in that mold. But like the thing that I noticed the similarities between a guy like Mayer, who is obviously still really young, and a guy like Witten, who was a veteran who played for so long and was one of the top receiving tight ends in the NFL for a long time, is just the feel for the spacing, the feel for where he can get, like where those openings are, how to kind of sit and find those spots. That's what kind of stands out to me about Mayer that really sets him apart from a lot of different tight ends. Because a lot of guys have good hands and can run routes and, do all these things, but it's sort of that innate feel for, just his feel for the field and how to just find little ways to get open so consistently, even if there's not a big opening.
Yeah, I think the best comparison is the baby Gronk, and it's for that reason. He's got really great hands. He's got good, body awareness and being able to control his body. And like you said, not a lot of those throws, but at least, because I watched all of his throws at least all of his receptions on loop, all 11 of them, probably 3 or 4 times. So there was a few of them where, they're just extended plays. And like you said, he just knows where to sit down in the zone. He knows, and that goes back to, again, using his body to just kind of sit down in these, open spaces or, tight kind of windows, and just use his body to kind of shield off or box out, frame out everyone else. And I think that we're only going to see kind of as he continues to go on to the next level, I think we're going to see his body kind of get a little bit leaner. And I think we'll see him, pick up a little bit of speed, like we see with Kelsey and Gronk. So I think his game is only going to elevate in that way. But for right now, just the natural size of his body, getting the matchups, one-on-one matchups based off formations and personnel. And it helps that Notre Dame's able to run the ball so successfully because, then you have to commit, certain players. So all of it just bodes well to Mayer's game. And I think he's just doing, what he's built to do in this offense. And if he can continue to do it, like I said, this team will go a very long way because he's showing that, you don't necessarily need, while yes, you would like some, high-end luxury wide receivers, he can also provide that production at the same time. And when you're running last point here, but when you're running the ball so well early on first and second down, it makes those 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 passes to Mayer so much easier because, he's just getting 3 yards by the body himself, just getting open, catching the ball. It's automatically kind of 3 yards, and it's a well-oiled machine on their offense.
Yeah, I agree. As to Stanford, let's talk a little Stanford because we've got rapid fire, and then again, we've got the Stanford Writer coming up later in the show. So they rank 69th in the nation in total offense, about 400 yards a game. That's currently 2 spots ahead of Marshall, 4 spots ahead of Cal, and 10 spots ahead of next week's opponent, UNLV, in that department. So 4 Notre Dame opponents kind of bunched up there in the 60s and down to 79. The rushing offense only a little over 138 a game. They ranked 90th, making them and Boston College, who is dead last, 131st at 68 yards per game. The 2 lowest ranked rushing offenses the Irish will play this season. But that said, now they're doing more RPO type stuff this year in their offense. And Marcus Freeman was asked about that today. So I've got this clip. Let's see what he had to say about it.
It's 2 different dilemmas that it presents. Where if you're in zone coverage, the minute you trigger as a linebacker to go stop the run, you're opening up space behind you that they can pull it and throw it, and they're creating space and trying to put your linebackers in a run-pass conflict. Well, then the answer is say, okay, go play man. Well, now you're playing man-to-man coverage and with no underneath help because the backers have to be able to respect that run game. And so you got to do some different things up front to try to be able to have your backers play a little bit more patiently, and you got to be able to play man-to-man coverage at times versus some big, tall, long wideouts. And so it's a really good scheme that they've done a good job of being able to execute in games, and it's going to be a big challenge for us.
What do you think of that RPO game you see from Stanford, Jess?
I think, the number one thing I saw when looking at kind of Stanford and what they've shown so far is, they're a 1-4 team, but they've played a pretty tough schedule. 6-0 USC, 4-2 Washington, 5-1 Oregon, 4-2 Oregon State, combined 19-4 record in their 4 losses. And their offense is putting up substantial points. It's not really the issue. The issue is that their defense has been extra poor and not really able to stop some of these offenses. So, I think Notre Dame can't really sleep on this Stanford offense. They can't overlook them. And I really think that it's going to provide some tough matchups for some of Notre Dame's weakest positions defensively, and that's specifically the linebackers and what Freeman was talking about. The Notre Dame linebackers are going to be tested the most in this game. They have to honor run, but can't allow for passing holes or lanes to kind of form behind them. And that's what Freeman was getting into, Freeman was kind of getting into. And I think the number one way that you can negate these kind of RPO looks or get them, get into situations where you don't have to necessarily respect run as much as pass is you have to stop Stanford kind of early in their possessions and force them into second and third and longs, because then it's definite, kind of passing situations. And that's going to take the pressure off of your linebackers to be in these constant, pass option reads. And, quite frankly, they're not easy reads. It's quite literally trying to defend, 2 things at one time. If you take too many steps forward, they're going to, drop the pass behind you. If you don't come up quick enough, they're going to smash you in the mouth for 3 or 4 rushing yards. So it's a really tough matchup. And that's why I think that, this week at linebacker, I think that Notre Dame should kind of get experimental with what their linebackers can do. And, Prince Colley, the speculation of him getting more playing time. This is a type of game that would really benefit him because he is so good in the pass. He's quicker on his feet. Being quicker like that allows for quicker recovery.
I was going to say he can recover quicker. I think that's a big thing. Yeah.
Right. And so even if you're playing on a little side of air, Colley can recover a little bit better and get back into, passing windows quicker, or recover and kind of shoot the gap in the run game a little bit. But, most importantly, like I said, this is going to be a hard game for these linebackers, especially if they let Stanford kind of get into rhythm. They need to, get them off schedule, get them into third and long situations where you're telling them, okay, we definitely expect you to pass here and we can rely more on our safety and some zone coverage.
And it doesn't help
our secondary.
Doesn't help when you've got an opponent pinned deep and you give up a 3rd and 18 run for a first down either. It's like, it just shows, there's going to be some stress on those linebackers and why they've got to step it up. Okay. So here's Freeman talking about Stanford's big receivers as well. And I'll tell you how big here in just a second.
When you look at the wideouts and the length, they're tall guys that are good at jump balls, and they're going to throw it up to you, and then if you get too aggressive, they're going to run some different routes that try to put you at a disadvantage. So I think our DBs are definitely going to be challenged this week in terms of being able to win the 50-50 balls and understand there is no just run game. Right, in terms of a lot of their run game is based off an RPO, and so the corners at every play have to be ready to have the ball thrown their way and be able to win those matchups, versus some lengthy receivers. And
it kind of spent the week being a little cocky, and you look at some of these guys. It's like Michael Wilson, 6'2", 20 yards per catch. Elijah Higgins, 6'3", a little bit more manageable, 11.3 per catch. Bryson Tremaine, 6'4", 12.7 per catch. And then John Humphreys, 6'5", not a lot of catches, just 8, but he averages 16 per catch. That is some size that Notre Dame is going to have to contend with out there. And, you got a 6'6" quarterback throwing him the ball as well. He can see over the line pretty well. He's not shot putting it out there.
Yeah, it's looking at the Stanford film, the first thing you notice is their just overall size and kind of physicality at all positions. That's quarterback, that's wide receiver, that's running back. These are guys who are just thick guys, big guys, hard to bring down. And that's going to obviously present challenges. But I think the biggest thing when talking about big wide receivers and RPO games is you have to look at what's trying to be accomplished. In the RPO scheme, you have only X amount of time until you have to throw it, because then your linemen are going to be illegally downfield kind of blocking. So there's still that kind of rhythm of it. They can't it's not like you can hold, draw out a run play action for 4 or 5 seconds, or else your linemen are going to be illegally downfield. So what's that mean? The quarterback's, as soon as he's faking it, is trying to get it out. So that's, really oftentimes it's going to be quick slant routes, in and outs. Like, what I'm trying to say is these routes are going to be quick, and it's going to be quick for, these wide receivers who are going to be using their bodies on slants to kind of just step in front of corners, get their frame, similar to like Michael Mayer, just getting their frame, catching the ball, and then forcing, just being bigger and forcing those guys to kind of make tackles, after contact and that kind of stuff. So you see a lot of yak yards. And so that's what, Notre Dame corner, secondary, you got to press up on these guys. You got to make them kind of earn these yards on RPO looks. You can't just give them these immediate quick releases off the line of scrimmage, or there's going to be hit with screens, slants all day. And that goes in, off of the RPO look that Freeman is talking about, and why having, such big body wide receivers is important, is because when you're faking that run and getting the ball out quickly, it's just, throwing it to your wide receiver that's big and physical, that's just standing in front of kind of a smaller corner or safety. So you really got to jam them off the line of scrimmage. You got to be in their face and kind of make them earn those things, and then get them, like we said earlier, into long down situations.
There's not necessarily a lot of speed out there either, but Jeff Brown and their running back situation is not good either from an overall health standpoint and depth. Jeff Brown, though, isn't the best thing to do against the slow mesh Stanford is using to aggressively attack it. Should you aggressively, just go after the mesh, basically, I guess is what he's saying.
I mean, that's ideally the best way that you blow up a play is you get a defensive tackle to bust through, or you get a blitzing linebacker to kind of bust through, and you're just tackling at the mesh point. You're taking out kind of both options at one time when the quarterback is trying to, give the ball into the belly of the running back, but then also kind of decide if he's trying to pass it at the same time. Well, you blow all of that up by just simply, blowing up that kind of mesh point. And you can do that through, someone's going to go unguarded. That's often the scheme in RPO looks. The defensive end is going to crash down and blow it up, whether a defensive tackle can get through, or if you're doing some sort of blitzing scheme where, your linebacker is setting the edge and your defensive end is kind of folding in. Just either way, you have to blow up that mesh point and immediately kind of take away that run option.
All right. A lot of good stuff. A lot of good thoughts on Stanford and that offense. And, their defense is just porous. It is just, it's just flat out. They're giving up over 200 rushing yards a game. It's just flat out not the physical Stanford team that we got used to seeing a few years back. It has just been in steady decline. You're right. They've played some good teams. But again, I think that just like Marcus Freeman has preached, this game is going to be won down in the trenches based on things like you're talking about, whether it's stopping, the run, blowing up the mesh, or on the other side of the ball, being able to run the ball effectively and put yourself, like what you were alluding to either or earlier, the team that puts themselves in better second and third and short type situations is the team that's going to have more success in this game, especially since neither team causes any turnovers.
Yeah, and I forgot, when we were talking about Michael Mayer there and, what maybe Stanford can do and other teams can do to guard him, simply, the best option is just bracket coverage. And bracket coverage is you have, kind of a guy underneath and a guy over top just to cover both routes. A lot of tight end routes or option routes sitting in the holes, the zones like we talked about. And I just wanted to get to this because I know we didn't get, we kind of didn't get to it earlier, but that's really the only thing you can do to stop Michael Mayer is you got to bracket him, maybe commit to double coverage. But if you're going to do that, bracket coverage is usually kind of safety over top and then a linebacker underneath for the underneath routes. But if you're going to do that, then that means, Jaden Thomas, Lorenzo Styles, they got to do stuff with their one-on-one coverage and get open. Because if you're going to commit two guys to Mayer and you're already committing to a run game, guys like Styles and Jaden Thomas should get open.
Somebody's going to get open. That's right.
Somebody's going to get open, and they have to be able to take advantage of the opportunities because the good teams are going to get into that with Notre Dame. They're going to get into stopping the run game. They're going to get into, taking Mayer away. And then what's it going to be? Well, then, someone's got to be open, and it's got to be time for Styles and Thomas to make these kind of big plays that we saw a little bit of.
to Drew Pine's credit, I like the fact that he's not afraid to keep going to Mayer, even though they are already dedicating more attention to him. He's not afraid to go to him. He knows how good Michael Mayer is, and he's willing to throw the ball up and let Michael Mayer go get it. More times than not, Mayer's getting it.
Yeah, and if it's not broke, then don't fix it. So if teams want to continue to guard Mayer that way, and more power to him, because I think Notre Dame's found what they're going to do if that's the case.
Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire. I'm all fired up.
Let's do it. It comes a little bit earlier tonight because, again, we've got a lot of things on these Thursday shows. Over under 89.5 receptions for Mr. Mayer, Michael Mayer, this season. 89.5 is the number.
You're getting real good at these numbers. Mayer right now is at 33 receptions in 5 games. That's a 6.6 average, 8 games left, including a bowl game. I'm assuming we're going to include bowl games in these statistics.
Yep.
Following this average, his season would end at 86 catches, with the 6.6 average and the 8 more games. I think it's going to go over, and I think it's because we're going to see more production like last week. I think the first couple of weeks were kind of slower. We obviously see that Mayer is Pine's number 1 target. They're already best friends. So I just think that we're going to kind of see more weeks of 7 to 8 catches, maybe double-digit catches going forward. I don't think we're going to see any more of those 4 or 5 kind of smaller catch games. So I'm going to go with the over, and I think he's going to get right close to 100.
You know what? I was initially leaning under on this, but like the more everything that you say makes sense, and the more I look at it, like Mayer already has the 33 catches, like you said. The next 2 guys, Lorenzo Styles and Chris Tyree, add up to 33 catches. Styles has 19 and Tyree has 14. And again, they're all, defenses are already devoting extra coverage to him, and he's only getting better. So I just think we're going to continue to see, just what you said, between probably 7 and 10 catches. Drew Pine's just going to keep going to it until they can stop it, and people are going to have to prove they can stop it. Right now, Michael Mayer is a machine, and he is such a huge part of the passing game right now. And again, the focal point and the one guy consistently producing right now, you just got to keep feeding that. And then if they do finally prove that they can stop that, then like you said, you find some other guys. But I think he's going to be right up there, assuming, all the way into that bowl game. I think he's going to end up going over that number as well, and he will have at least 90 catches this year. All right, another over-under. 1.5 Irish running backs who will have more than 100 rushing yards against Stanford Saturday.
So this one I went back and forth with. I'm going to have to go with over. I think Estime and Diggs both get over 100 rushing yards. Estime looking for the 3rd straight game. I think he definitely gets it. Diggs is more of the wild card. Stanford has a really poor run defense, and I don't think they've seen a running attack quite as strong as Notre Dame's too. So both of those things bode well for Notre Dame. And I just think, we're going to see a lot of the same game plan against BYU, running, early and often, making, getting those big chunk plays on first down, setting up 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. And, it's going to be a heavy, steady dosage of Notre Dame run, followed by, kind of short passing downs. So I definitely think that we'll see a lot of rushing yards. And I'm more than convinced that we're going to see 2 guys get over the 100-yard mark.
Stanford, again, allowing 207 rushing yards per game. Surprising that Colgate and Oregon State are the only 2 teams not to have a 100-yard rusher against Stanford's defense this season. USC had one. Washington had one. Oregon almost had 2. Bo Nix, the quarterback, had 141, and they had a running back have 97. So I'm surprised that someone already hasn't had a 200-yard rusher, considering, again, the fact that they give up so much rushing yards. I think the yards from scrimmage thing is easy. I think at least 2 Irish running backs will get over 100 yards from scrimmage. The two with 100 yards rushing, though, I think that like if I had to say one, I would go Estime, and then I think the other two might be, between like 75 and 90 in that area. But I think they'll make up with the pass receptions. So I'm going under. I don't think that they'll have 200-yard rushers. I think they've got a really good chance to once again have three guys with 100 yards from scrimmage, though.
Yeah, and I think we saw a lot of really good things from Diggs last week. I
Yeah.
think that he showed a lot of really good runs, and I think what we saw the most, and I think what was the most impressive about Diggs's running is, when he was reaching that second level, you saw a lot of kind of using moves to get past the safeties and corners and still being able to keep his feet and his speed, and that's a little contrast to Estime, who's kind of looking to run people over in the hole. And so, yeah, Diggs has a little bit more of that shiftiness, but he can still, get up to top speed out of his cuts and shifts, very impressively. I like Tyree still. I just think with the way that, I think Diggs and Estime complement each other better as runners. And Tyree's kind of more of your perimeter kind of, scat back guy that you're throwing more passes to. So all purpose wise, I see Tyree getting there, but straight runners, I think Diggs and Estime. I really like what I saw out of those two last week, and I think with Diggs' shoulder getting better, I think you're going to see more of his game kind of evolve. He's just getting started right now.
Alan says Tyree's going to catch a touchdown pass this week. He's calling that. And Ryan said he found Diggs to be more inconsistent than consistent. So, I don't know.
A good problem to have with three running backs.
Yeah, it is a good problem to have. Play the hot hand. The resounding sentiment from people, it seems like, who were at the Shamrock Series game in Las Vegas last week was that it was some of the best atmosphere for a Notre Dame game in recent memory, topping Notre Dame Stadium by far. So with that in mind, do you think Notre Dame should consider making Vegas like a regular destination for the Shamrock Series? Like keep Vegas on a regular rotation, maybe every 4 years or something like that?
I like the idea of, potentially kind of rotating and returning, every 5 to 10 years. But the whole point to me of this series is kind of to explore new venues, go to places you've never gone to before. And that's kind of, at least in my opinion, what the premise of the whole series was built on. And this also allows for, more of your fans at a national level to kind of make games that they wouldn't usually. So, if you're putting all the games in one spot, you're not necessarily kind of allowing maybe your friends up in the Northeast corner to eventually make a game at some point. So I like the idea of coming back and doing it kind of more often, but not like a every year consistent basis.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, not every year. I'm talking about maybe every fourth year, every fifth year.
Every fourth, fifth year. I think it would, especially, considering it. Yeah, it sounded like I had a bunch of friends, posting on their social media, staying at, the different places in Vegas, and it just seemed like a really good time, and the stadium itself was sold out. So obviously, it did well in that aspect. So, I think it would be fun to do it and eventually go out there, because I've never, been out to Vegas before.
Yeah, and talking to some guys, like in the media who were at the game, it's a dome stadium, obviously, but it was an open air press box, so there was no glass on the front of the press box. So they could really hear and feel the environment, and so, like, again, they said it was some of the best that they've ever seen. And I think a lot of people will go to Vegas, like I've said, Seattle, I think would be cool, or San Francisco, some of these other places, and even places that they've been are cool. Like, San Antonio, they've been to DC, they've been to New York City. A lot of people like to go to Vegas, and, a lot of people will get their drink on and buzz around Vegas and do their thing. So I'm sure that helped from an atmosphere standpoint as well on a Saturday night in Las Vegas. And really, they're a couple hours behind us time-wise, so they still had plenty of time to go out and do their thing afterwards. It was just part of the party. So I think it would make a lot of sense, just because, again, you get that kind of buzz, you get that kind of atmosphere. I don't know of any other places like that, again, people would be like, man, I got to go, to Arizona, I got to go to Phoenix, it's hot out there. You can jump in the swimming pool or whatever, but you're not going to be able to do the kind of stuff that you can do. There's entertainment in Vegas. There's obviously gambling in Vegas. There are other, reasons to go out there. You can pack a lot into a couple days in Las Vegas. So the fans seem to enjoy it. So I think it might be worth looking into. So Stephen A. Smith, Jess, this is juicy. I just saw this today. Stephen A. Smith had some things to say about Brian Kelly this week, and I will read it to you. Quote, this is from Stephen A. Smith on Brian Kelly. I am not hearing anything good about Brian Kelly. I've interviewed him a few times in the past. I know he had a stellar record at Notre Dame. I like him. They looked awful at LSU last week. Awful. Tennessee just rolled over them 40-13. I'm hearing the players ain't fond of him. The administration ain't fond of him. The fans ain't fond of him. The town ain't fond of him. End quote from Stephen A. Smith. Are you surprised by any of this?
I guess I'm surprised that like Stephen A. Smith has the inside scoop because he's not really known for
a college football insider.
But yeah, just not like football in general, and then college football, and then so like it's kind of like asking the legitimacy of all these kind of things. But I just if that's the case, I guess I am a little surprised because of where things ended last year and kind of where they are. Right now, yeah, they lost to Florida State to open the season, but Florida State's a pretty good team. First game of the year, had some mistakes. They lost to a good. I know you don't want to get blown out by Tennessee, but Tennessee's another good team. So I am a little surprised. I think that people are kind of maybe overreacting here a little bit. Nothing's kind of fixed in the first season, especially when you're kind of being tasked with overhauling a program that just won a national championship, not too many years ago. So I just, with everything that's going on and, the fact that they're not like 0-6 or something, I am a little surprised. I think that, things are being kind of jumps the gun here a little bit.
I mean, you knew it was a matter of time. We all knew it was a matter of time. Driscoll tried to tell them, this summer, and they all, everyone's over, like, just can't believe, it's kill the messenger. Nobody wants to believe it because the great Brian Kelly won all these games at Notre Dame, and now he's at LSU, and he's the greatest coach ever. And everybody up here, nobody's surprised that there are other sides to Brian Kelly. Am I surprised that they've maybe turned so quickly? Yeah.
Right.
And like to your point about Stephen A. Smith maybe not being a college football insider, he's probably talking to his guy Marcus Spears because he's an LSU guy, and they walk around the building, I think, probably together,
right,
every day. So that could be his source. I don't know, but I don't think anybody up here is surprised to hear this at all. Did you see any tears shed when Brian Kelly walked out of the Goog after he dropped in and talked to the team before he left? No. Did you see excitement later in the week when Marcus Freeman was announced? Yeah, you saw a lot of excitement. And, again, there's the polished front that Brian Kelly puts on when he decides he wants to put it on. And there's, those prickly moments when he stands at the podium and he's a little ticked off and he's tired of being poked a little bit. And I'm sure that a lot of people are seeing that down there right now. So I'm not surprised at all, but, again, maybe I'm surprised to see it kind of rear its head so soon because they did have, the only thing I'll say on his side is they had a horrible roster, coming out of last year. And they had a lot of roster turnover as well. And, it wasn't going to be easy. They played decent defense before last week, but Tennessee also has one of the two, maybe the best offense in the country. So again, I'm not going to shed any tears, but I'm not surprised to hear any of this stuff at all. Okay. Who has more to prove in tonight's Bears-Commanders game? Justin Fields or Carson Wentz?
In my opinion, Carson Wentz has a lot more to prove. His coach had some tough criticism of him this week. The Commanders are struggling at 1-4. The Bears and Fields haven't been playing bad of recent. They did some really nice things against the Vikings last week and potentially could have came out with a win on a last-second drive, kind of going down for a field goal. And I think Fields kind of knows his role in the offense more. Fields has less kind of overall role in the offense because the Bears, they don't really pass the ball, and it's not even close compared to other teams. How many times they're attempting to pass the ball. They're clearly trying to run the ball, establish some run games. So I just think because of, Carson Wentz and what he means to the game plan, and just kind of overall, just the animosity this week kind of between Ron Rivera, the whole team, where the Commanders sit. I think Carson Wentz has more to prove, but lucky for Carson Wentz, he is 6-0 on Thursday Night Football. So, maybe he stands a chance this week.
I'll just say, I was talking to a Bears fan the other day, and I was like, well, Field doesn't have any receivers, and the guy's going, these are professional receivers. They're all really good. It shouldn't matter what their level is. He's like, Mooney went up. He made a one-handed, do all this stuff. Well, Mooney is a number one guy, but he's really probably a number 3 receiver on a good team someplace else, right? But he's number 1, which means that number 2 and number 3 are really, like 3s, 4s, 5s, if they're on another team. They're deeper in the rotation, guys. So I think a lot more is on Justin Fields because he doesn't have an offensive line. But this is a Commanders team that, like, if you're the Bears and Justin Fields, that you have to win. And, like, you're only going to get so much time if you're Justin Fields. It doesn't matter what you do or don't have. The clock is already ticking on Justin Fields and his career, just like it started ticking early on Mitch Trubisky. You've got to overcome whatever is around you, whatever lack of support that you have. And if you're really a number 1 pick, you got to go out and do it. So to me, it's Justin Fields because he's younger. Carson Wentz, to me, has already proved that he's completely overhyped and completely, there's Carson Wentz is not a franchise quarterback. I think we know that by now because he's on his 3rd team in 3 years. So I don't think there's anything left for Carson Wentz to prove. He's already proven he's not a good NFL quarterback. So to me, it's more on Justin Fields than anybody else in a game like this against a team that you need to beat if you're the Chicago Bears, if you're going to win any games this year.
Yep.
All right, MLB played all of its best of 3 wild card series last weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They say they're thinking about keeping those wild card series on the weekends in the future. So do you buy or sell that as a good idea?
I buy this. I like, with how short of a series it is and the fact that it's consecutive days, it seems to set up for the perfect Friday, Saturday, Sunday format. And also, it's very promoting to kind of the fans, not having to worry about a 1 o'clock game on a Thursday or Wednesday, getting off of work. I think it just promotes a lot of fan attendance when you can put them on the weekend and, people can block out their days and go to the games rather than kind of having to worry about, the kids at school and then also, the taking off of work and all that stuff. I just think it lends to better, turnout and just overall, just the excitement. The teams make the wild card. It's a lot of times you see teams kind of sneak in the wild card. So you would like to see those teams kind of, playing these meaningful, exciting games and not half empty stadiums. So I like the weekend format.
Yeah, I think that probably makes a lot of sense. Because when I first heard this, I'm like, well, wouldn't you want to get it? The biggest thing to me is getting it out of the weekend so you're not competing against college football and the NFL. Because, like, as a fan of both, that's the thing to me is, some of the stuff you say about afternoon games and stuff like that makes sense, even though, again, I think it's kind of cool when we get to see some afternoon games every now and then, especially someone who works from home, who can put the game on in the background, that kind of stuff. So to me, like, I didn't get to watch that much, very minimal last week because of the fact that football is obviously on Saturday and Sunday. So I didn't get to watch as much. So I'd rather see it, like maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday personally. So it's not going head to head with so much football. So that I actually could watch a little bit more baseball, but I get your point about the fans and all that stuff as well, and giving them the opportunities to be at those games. But they are playoff games. So, like, if they really matter, you're going to find a way to be there anyway.
I guess that's a good point.
Right? Yeah. DT says he is not a fan of it. And yeah, There you go. DC said I was literally about to say what your dad said. So he's talking straight to you. All right. Alex Rodriguez and Michael Kay called one of the wild card series last weekend. What do you think of A-Rod as a TV analyst?
A-Rod TV analyst isn't the greatest. I respect his opinions, and he was obviously a great player. I just think that sometimes he gets a little bit in over his head with kind of his actual TV skills. I think he could do better with just maybe dialing it back and letting kind of Michael Kay take more of the lead, and then just kind of filling in with the supplemental baseball knowledge, in-game knowledge that he has. But yeah, overall, I am not a big supporter of Alex Rodriguez and his TV analyst skills. I do enjoy seeing him kind of on the post-game shows, though, with like David Ortiz and like
that's where he's best.
Yeah, that's why I think that's like the like the TNT crew after games for basketball is a good comparison, when you have a bunch of guys, kind of giving each other a hard time, guys who all played, guys who were obviously Ortiz and Rodriguez were rivals, and so them poking fun at each other. I just think that that's better suited for him. I think that the actual in-game stuff is, I wouldn't say too much for him. It doesn't go with kind of his skill set. I think that the afterwards post-game shows are perfect for him, and I think him trying to extend himself like this is just not as good of a look as he might think.
Yeah, he is classic word salad guy when he is in the booth, doing a live game. He just talks, but there's no real point to what he's saying. Like the interaction that he has with the different players, like with Poppy and some of that stuff with the Fox stuff that he does in the studio is a lot better. He just, I think what says the most about Alex Rodriguez as a game analyst is like, you don't see a lot of hate for Alex Rodriguez, right? But what that says to me is he's not saying anything. Like, you see a lot more. You obviously see hate for Joe Buck. He's the ultimate, even though he doesn't do baseball anymore. Yeah, you still see it from the football side. There's a lot for John Smoltz and some of these other guys. It's because they actually will say something. Alex Rodriguez never says anything. It's all just very vanilla, talks in circles. There's nothing to it. He's not even explaining rules that well. It's like he gets in that booth and he overthinks everything that he thinks he needs to say because he always wants to put on this public image. And I just don't think that he has ever come across very well. And that's exactly who I was thinking of. We Are Not Marshall is Brian Kelly with the classic word salads. So there you go. Alan is not interested in pro sports. Man. Okay, you can be the 1%, Alan. That's cool.
Second time I've seen the comment, just not interested in the NFL or any professional sports. Diversity, right. Alan.
That's right. Well, I guess we will wrap it up with that, Jess, because we've got the Stanford guy coming up. So maybe Alan will be interested in that, since we'll talk a little college football coming back here after wrapping up Rapid Fire. Well, Jess, you have a good weekend. Continue to recover, and I will talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Hopefully we get a good, keep the train moving, another win, keep this winning streak going.
Absolutely. All right. So we will talk to you later. And coming up right now, we've got an interview. We're going to talk a little Stanford football, kind of get the state of Stanford football, and we'll just jump in right now. We're talking a little Stanford football. Harold Gutmann is with us. He's with the Bay Area News Group, covers the Cardinal. Thanks for doing this today, Harold. Appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's start, I guess, maybe kind of big picture with Stanford, because, we out here in this part of the country, not being in the conference with Stanford, we kind of shift our attention to the Cardinal once a year for the most part. But I mean, after a decade or so of really being nationally prominent, the program is just in a much different place right now. How would you kind of describe the state of Stanford football?
Yeah, for sure. It's not good. Like you said, I think the last couple of years, they went 4-8, then they did pretty well during the COVID year. I think they went 4-2, but then 3-9, and now 1-4 this year. So you're looking at an entire class of players who won't have gone to a bowl game or really experienced a 500 season or any level of success that Stanford has been accustomed to in the last decade under David Shaw. So yeah, it's definitely trending downward. A lot of the things that Stanford used to be known for, power running game, stopping the run, controlling possession, is not happening. Like their run game has been in the bottom 10 of the FBS in the last few years. It's a little better this year, but they can't stop the run now. They're in the bottom 10 doing that. So, and they're turning the ball over like crazy. So definitely, it's not just that it's going poorly. It's just not at all what people are accustomed to seeing. So it's been a bit of a shock.
We're used to seeing, like you kind of said, power offensive lines and running backs like Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and some other guys, who are really good come through there. It seems like they've had decent recruiting classes, at least recently. How did they get to where they are right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. The talent level is there. Even at quarterback, I mean, Davis Mills, but he's a NFL quarterback. Tanner McKee is going to be probably first or second round NFL draft pick. So they've had some NFL level talent for sure. They got some wide receivers playing the NFL right now. Tight ends still are a strong position for them. So yeah, I mean, they've definitely. I think a lot of the changes that have affected all the teams in college football seem to hit Stanford harder. A lot of the teams that they're playing now, like for instance, they played USC second game of the season. I mean, USC, obviously new quarterback from Oklahoma, like a top receiver from Pitt. They were able to take like 30 some transfers and just really revitalize that squad pretty quickly. But Stanford, just because of the academic requirements, they're not able to take Stanford. They get maybe one graduate transfer a year. They got safety from Oklahoma, but a lot of the ways that teams improve quickly, Stanford isn't able to take advantage of. So I mean, that's part of it. That's not all of it. Obviously, the downward trend started well before this kind of unlimited transfer and NIL money came in. Well, but I think that's definitely part of it.
And that's kind of, Notre Dame is obviously in the same boat. The academics, or at least similar. And that's something that Notre Dame goes through is like, it's much easier to get in a grad transfer than it is an underclass transfer. I assume, is that kind of the same for Stanford? Are they in that same kind of boat?
Yeah, absolutely. They've never had an undergrad transfer, and the grad transfers, I think they've had maybe 3 in the history of the program. And meanwhile, it used to be at least they weren't losing people to the transfer portal because people really want that Stanford degree. But now that's not even the case. Their top 2 running backs from last year, Austin Jones went to USC, and Nathaniel Pete went to Missouri as underclassmen, and that has never happened before. So it's not just that they're not getting people; it's that they're actually losing people.
Yeah, I mean that obviously hurts as well. I mean, assuming some big turnaround from where they are right now this season, this will be a 4th straight year without a bowl for Stanford, and it's year 12 for David Shaw. And it seems like, at least coming into the season, most of the stuff that I read says, well, he's safe, for the immediate future. Has that changed at all? Is there a hot seat talk with David Shaw right now?
Yeah, I mean, you might have read some of that from me because I'm one of those people who said he's safe. I think what will most likely happen is, last year, like I said, they went 3-9 and it was ugly. Like those last 7 losses. I know Notre Dame was the last one, but there are a lot of games that they were just not competitive. Yeah. And he didn't make any staff changes, no coordinators, no coaches. They were one of 5 teams, I think, out of like 130 of the FBS who didn't change a single position coach. I think if anything's going to happen, and David Shaw, he's very loyal to his staff. He thinks, if the team doesn't do well, it's not because of the coaching, it's because of scheme or something. But I think if anything's going to change, it won't be David Shaw at the top. I still think he's pretty comfortable, but he might be forced to make some staff changes.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, if he's safe, you would think that could be coming next. And
yeah, I know. I mean, the only reason I say that, not because he's doing a bang up job or anything, but if you look at the basketball program, I know we're talking about football, but Jared Haas this is entering his 6th year at Stanford, and they haven't made the tournament a single time, and he's still the coach. Yeah. So I think Stanford's unlike some other schools that would make changes quickly.
As a Kansas alum who was in school when Jared was still playing, I kind of keep my eyes peeled out there every now and then to see how they're doing. It's like, man, I wish they were doing a little bit better, but that obviously hasn't quite happened, like you said, either. So, with the exception of the pandemic year, these teams have played every year going back to 1997, and Marcus Freeman called it a rivalry game this week. And I'm curious, does it feel like a rivalry game on that end? Is Notre Dame Stanford, does it feel like a rivalry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously there's a trophy on the line,
right?
But with Stanford, they have so many, I guess, like every other game, it seems like a rivalry game. Like they have a rivalry with USC. They have like Cal is kind of their natural rival. UCLA, and they have all these games that Oregon, like Stanford, Oregon was always, or historically had been in the last 20 years, for the top of the Pac-12 North. So it seems like every other week they're facing a game that could be considered sort of a rivalry. I think they do get up a little bit more for this than maybe like an Oregon State or a Washington State. But I wouldn't say that this is the game that they have circled on their calendar necessarily. Like this is the one that we're looking forward to. But I mean, it is on national TV all the time, every time. So I mean, that is something. It's going to be their longest road trip of the year. So I know they're preparing for that. But,
Sure.
And really, at this point, I mean, any game is a big game for them. A chance to break their losing streak.
That's true.
I don't think they can be choosy.
That's true. We always see a lot of empty seats, even when Notre Dame does play out there. You mentioned Cal. Yeah. I mean, is that basically the game that's a guaranteed sellout? And, regardless of what the season happens to be and everything else is kind of up in the air, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. Cal gets the biggest crowd just because they're just based on proximity and they have a large alumni base kind of in the area. But yeah, the crowd, I mean, people don't go to Stanford for the big game day crowds. That's for sure. Yeah, it's getting people in the stands has been a struggle. But I would say that Cal is probably the biggest crowds. And then Notre Dame and USC are probably next in line. And Oregon travels really well too.
Sure, that makes sense. We were talking about the future potentially of this series the other day. How important do you think it is on the Stanford end to keep this series with Notre Dame going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's obviously huge for recruiting in the middle of the country. Like I said, it's a guaranteed national TV spot every time. I mean, they recruit nationally, as does Notre Dame. So I think it's really important to have these rivalries that aren't just based on geography, like not just playing the West Coast schedule. It's important to get out in the Eastern time zone for sure. And like you said, I mean, it is very well attended. It's a high, usually a high caliber game. So I would assume that if Notre Dame would have Stanford, Stanford would want to continue it kind of in perpetuity.
I'm curious with, the USC, UCLA before the season started, the bombshell that they were going to be going to the Big Ten, and there was talk of Stanford in there and all that. So I guess first, sort of the reaction up there in Northern California and that area you're in to the USC, UCLA news, and then, anything new along the lines. I haven't heard much lately in terms of, Stanford possibly jumping, but I have heard, Kevin Warren saying that maybe a couple more teams could be coming in to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially we were shocked, like pretty much everyone else. I think people maybe thought USC might be looking, but I think they were surprised that UCLA was going to go just because they're part of the Cal State system, and people thought they would be connected to Cal, and how could UCLA go and kind of abandon Cal? Obviously, they got around that. So, but yeah, I think it was a surprise. I mean, I think if the Pac-12 dissolves, then obviously Stanford needs a landing spot, but I don't think they're looking to go to the Big Ten. It sounds like the Big Ten, if they wanted, whoever they wanted, they would have gotten originally. It sounds like so. I think they are kind of holding their fire for a little bit at least. So I don't anticipate any moves kind of in the near future. I know the TV contracts are being negotiated right now. I think once that comes out, that might settle some things down. The expanded playoffs helps. People maybe say, well, do I really want to jump to the Big Ten and maybe be the 5th or 6th best team when the Pac-12, it's wide open. I could be in the playoffs every year if I have a good, a 10-win team. So I haven't, like you said, it's been kind of quiet lately. They seem like Stanford, schools like Stanford would be a good fit academically for the Big Ten. Sure. I'm sure if they were invited, they would go if it meant, the Pac-12 just rating them and being rated, and then there would be no more Pac-12. They'd need someplace to go. But yeah, I think just like everyone else, I think they were surprised.
Right.
And sort of just waiting to see what the next steps are. It's pretty wild.
As someone who covers it, how confident are you in the future of the Pac-12 and them staying together?
I think in the short to middle term, like in the next, I think they'll get this next TV contract on maybe like 5 or 6 years, and I think I'm confident that they'll stay together for that long.
Okay.
I think after that, sort of all bets are off. I think, what this SC and UCLA I think showed is that there's no kind of certainty anymore. And historic, I mean, you mentioned, Stanford and Notre Dame have been playing since '97. I mean, they've been playing USC and UCLA since World War I practically. So obviously that doesn't matter anymore. Geographic, proximity doesn't matter. So I think it would be kind of foolish to say that anything's for sure, kind of more than 5 years down the line. But I think for the next, through the length of this next TV contract, it should be secure.
All right. Well, as far as this team, like last week, they looked like they were going to end a 9-game Pac-12 losing streak. They're playing Oregon State. They blow a 14-point lead in the second half. How did that just get away from them the way it did?
Yeah, they were actually up 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they blew that. And it's pretty. I mean, you sort of expect it now just because the way that the last year plus has gone. I mean, Stanford hasn't beaten FBS team since I think October 2nd, 2021. So we're entering the 54th week of that, and most of those games have not been close. This one was. Yeah, it's sort of just indicative of a lot of things that have gone wrong for Stanford in the last 3 or 4 years that we've been talking about it. They couldn't run out the clock. They couldn't get that last first down. That they gave the ball back to Oregon State. Their defense sort of collapsed at the worst possible time. I mean, they gave up a 55-yard touchdown pass with 13 seconds left. They were kind of out of position. Yeah, I know. I mean, it was sort of, on the one hand, kind of a little bit of a fluky play, like the receiver caught it off the defensive back's helmet, but then the safety was out of position. So it was a little bit of bad luck, but also bad form. So yeah, it's why. And then when things start rolling the way that they're rolling, Stanford doesn't really have any game experience to fall back on. Like, this is how we close out a game. Like, this is how we make winning plays. So this just hasn't happened forever.
Right. Well, just looking at them statistically, I mean, there are a lot of lowlights, kind of what, as you alluded to off the top. I guess starting with the offense, they've scored some points, actually. They can score a little bit, but does everything kind of ride on Tanner McKee, the quarterback's shoulders with that offense?
Yeah, for sure. And especially now, I mean, they're down to really one healthy running back. Like I said, the top two running backs transferred in the offseason. And then they actually had EJ Smith, who was Emmitt Smith's son. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yep.
He was going to start a running back. His first carry was an 87-yard touchdown, first carry of the season. I mean, it was against Colgate, but still that showed some promise. Had, 100-yard game. And then I think after the second week, he was second in the Pac-12 in rushing. And then he suffered a season-ending injury. And so now they're down to really like their fourth string running back. His name's Casey Filkins. I mean, he's a good player, but then there's no depth behind him. And when you think about those Toby Gerhardt, like you said, Christian, I mean, these guys that just carry the ball time and time again, they can't really afford to do that with Casey. He's not really built that way. And so a lot is reliant on the passing game, which is on Tanner McKee's shoulders. Like you said, I mean, they do have some talent there. They have been putting up some points, but then the defense just has been unable to stop the run, get any kind of quarterback pressure. So it's been an issue on that side of the ball.
Well, and I mean, it is amazing looking at the fact that a Stanford team is giving up over 200 rushing yards a game, and they're giving up over 32 points a game as well. Is there anything that defense has that they can hang their hats on right now?
Yeah, their secondary is strong. They should be getting Kaiu Kelly, their top cornerback. He missed last week's game against Oregon State. They should be getting him back. So I'd say the secondary is strong, but like I said, the defensive line, it's young, it's inexperienced. They're kind of getting pushed around. And the other thing is they're just not getting any turnovers. They've only had 2 takeaways all season. I mean, that includes a game against Colgate, which is one of their 2 takeaways. So, it's bad enough that they can't get off the field. They can't stop the run. So it's really like a multitude of issues, as you would expect for a team that's 1-4. Not much going right. An 0-4 against the FBS.
Well, but going back to the fact that they are giving up over 200 yards a game, just watching them a little bit, I mean, they look like they've got guys who are at least similar to, body types and stuff like that. Why are they so bad against the run?
Yeah, they did switch their alignment from last year to this year. They had played kind of a 3-4. They're back to a 4-3, trying to take advantage of some of their personnel, but it's just not working. Yeah, like you said, I mean, they're recruiting the same types of guys. If you look at their roster, it's the same kind of guys, but I don't know if they're not getting coached up. They're not improving from freshman to senior year. They're not able to bring in added, additional talent.
Sure.
And they've hit a little bit by injuries, not so much on the defense, actually. That's more on the offense. So you can't even blame the injuries. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the Stanford coaching staff is really struggling with. So if I had the answer, that would be amazing, because I don't even think Stanford has an answer for that one.
Apparently not, since it kind of continues week after week. Right. Well, so Notre Dame's favored by 2 touchdowns. What needs to happen for Stanford to make a game out of it this Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, like I said, they need to start getting to the quarterback. They need to start forcing turnovers, because it's not where, if the defense can't stop these drives, with turnovers, with anything like that, with sacks, then they're just going to get run down.
Yeah.
I think alternatively, I mean, Stanford, they did have a problem turning the ball over, which was kind of like a double whammy. They had something like 4 turnovers in each of the first 3 games. They kind of cut down on those, so that's good. I mean, they certainly need to win the turnover battle. I think that's kind of obvious.
Yep.
And then yeah, just get some explosive plays out of the offense and kind of hold on. I don't know. I mean, I think the spread is it's probably an accurate reflection of where these teams are. I think I don't see many ways that Stanford's going to win this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that neither one of these teams are forcing turnovers this year. Notre Dame's not forcing them either.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Like
I think they're the bottom two.
Yeah, like if one of these two teams happens to, cause a bevy of turnovers, I think that's a big factor right there. But we haven't seen it, like you said, you haven't seen it from Stanford. We obviously haven't seen it from Notre Dame. So,
yeah.
All right, Harold Gutmann, he's from the Bay Area News Group, covers the Stanford Cardinal. We appreciate your time. It's not supposed to be too cold here in town this weekend, so
that's good. I know it's also I know it's a 7:30 kick your time, but it's 4:30 for Stanford, which is the earliest they've played all season. They had 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I think they're excited for like a slightly earlier start.
Used to the late ones by now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Hey, Harold, I appreciate you doing this. I know you've got a lot going on. Appreciate you jumping on and talking a little Stanford with us. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope it's a good game on Saturday. I hope I'm wrong.
Absolutely. I don't think Notre Dame fans hope it's a close game, though. I think that's the last thing that anyone on this end hopes it is, that it's a close game. That is going to do it for tonight. Final IB Nation Sports Talk of the week. Of course, Vince and I will be here with you Saturday morning. IB countdown to kickoff. We'll get it all cranked up. 10 o'clock Saturday morning. Ryan Roberts is going to join us. We'll have a little bit of recruiting talk there as well. Thanks for joining us as always. And if we don't see you Saturday morning, we will talk to you next week. IB Nation Sports Talk.